Sherlock, a young high-ranking demon, aims to become the greatest demon lord in his world. For that, he will need to own a dungeon and build it into a great place. And today is the day he finally owns a dungeon. Dungeons are mysterious places, full of wonderful and often horrifying things. But only the demons who own dungeons are given the title of Demon Lord and command the respect of other demons. The dungeon owners could earn a lot of money from the dungeon and also gather up their own forces. Sherlock was not always a high-ranking demon. He was born and raised in the slums. That is what drives him to become a demon lord and grow in glory and wealth. He worked hard for hundreds of years, and with the money he saved, he bought a dungeon for himself. He declares to the empty dungeon that this was the beginning of his story and he would surpass all other demon lords soon. But his dream of building the top dungeon is still too far away from him. As Sherlock activates the core of the dungeon using his magic and personal seal, he laughs as he tells the reason for buying this dungeon. He did not buy the ragtag dungeon because he was charmed by the succubus saleswoman, or because the surface world was close to him, or because he liked challenges. It was the only dungeon he could afford, and he was now the owner of the cheapest dungeon in the underworld. But nothing good is going to come from complaining about the dungeon, and Sherlock starts working. The dungeon core activates and Sherlock is excited to start working. But he is shocked when he sees a face in the core that talks to him. It tells that it was called Blue and calls Sherlock master. There was nothing like this mentioned in the manual, and Sherlock reads it quickly to see what could be done about this situation. He thinks that the saleswoman gave him a fake core or a defective one. His doubts are even more aggravated when the dungeon core starts saying words he had never heard before, like time travel or aborigines. Sherlock decides to go and return the cheap core and work hard to buy another one. But the core pleads to get him to stay. He tells his new master that he picked up those words from another world, and there was nothing wrong with him. But Sherlock is not listening to him, and the dungeon core explodes, leaving only the floating face that requests him to stop. He asks Sherlock to not return him and calls him the future great demon lord. Those words stop Sherlock right in his tracks, and he is impressed by the core. Not only could it think and talk, but it was also wise enough to see that he was going to become a great demon lord in the future. Sherlock is tempted by the flattery of Blue and decides to give him a chance. He tells the core of his ambition and what would the dungeon have once it became the top dungeon in the underworld. Blue is happy to oblige and says that he would help Sherlock in achieving his dream. But the first thing to do now is to summon monsters. Different dungeons could spawn different types of monsters according to their level, but since Sherlock's dungeon was at the lowest level, it could only summon goblins. He decides to go on with summoning right away, but Blue stops him and suggests a better idea instead. He says that the demon lord would have to pay goblins for their hard work, but he knew about the goblins from another world that would work for free, and even give him money too. Sherlock is shocked and asks Blue what he meant. Blue tells him that it was called an in-game purchase in the other world. Sherlock doesn't understand half the words his dungeon core uses, but decides to give it a try. He asks Blue how could he summon the goblins from another world and form a contract with them. Blue tells him that he had to create a server first. That was the connecting link between the two worlds. For that, Sherlock had to pour magic into him for 1 week at a steady rate so he could create a server from his memories. Sherlock works with Blue and finally builds a server. But before summoning the goblins, Blue tells Sherlock that the alien goblins would do some childish things like giving weird nicknames to themselves, fighting or trading among themselves, and the best way to manage them was through the official webpage. Sherlock is confused by another strange phrase, and Blue explains that it was like an embassy between the two worlds. Blue asks his master to create and manage the official website of the dungeon to recruit goblins. He presents a computer to Sherlock and has already done most of the basic work. Sherlock decides to give a catchy name to his dungeon and names it Dungeon Eternal Kingdom. In the human world, people see the advertisement for the first virtual reality online game, Dungeon Eternal Kingdom, and it was looking for first test players. The humans who see the ad are really excited and sign up for it. Sherlock is shocked on seeing their response and eagerness to join him. Blue tells him that there were about 800 million players or goblins in that world, and they had to select only 100 of them as the first test players. Sherlock selects 100 test players he sees potential in and tells them that they were qualified for the first round of tests. But before summoning them, Sherlock has some preparations to make. He withdraws the money from his bank account and goes to buy supplies for the goblins. But he has only 1,000 magic stones, and that is not enough to buy everything he needs. Even the cheapest iron pickaxes are much more expensive than he thought. But luckily, there is a cheaper offer for dungeon owners to establish a blacksmith shop in the dungeon itself. Sherlock likes the offer already, but Blue tells him that he could sell weapons made in the blacksmith shop to the goblins as well. He buys the shop, and with the remaining magic stones, he buys food for the goblins. But before summoning the goblins, Blue tells him that he must post novice missions. He explains to Sherlock that they were simple tasks to acquaint the goblins with this world, and he should reward them for completing them. Sherlock says that he will go bankrupt if he has to award goblins with magic stones, but Blue tells him that he can use coins as the goblins like gold and other precious metals. A blacksmith named Simba comes to Sherlock's dungeon to set up shop. He explains the terms of their contract and starts setting up his furnace. With that, it is time to summon the goblins. But nothing happens when Sherlock uses his summoning spell, and Blue tells him that the goblins were fine-tuning their appearance. The first one is named Kiruko Yumikawa, and he fearlessly explores the dungeon and interacts with the demon lord. Soon, the remaining goblins start popping up one after the other, and they are mesmerized by the dungeon. They were just humans who thought they were inside a game, but it was far too realistic. The goblins are quite chaotic and only get in order when Sherlock shows off his aura and asks them to pledge their loyalty to him and the dungeon. Then he asks the goblins to take up their missions and start working to build the dungeon. The goblins look at the tasks and rewards and start doing them. Sherlock thinks that with the mining in the dungeon, he would be able to procure armor and weapons to strengthen his hired goblins. That way, his dungeon would grow in strength and face stronger monsters. But the goblins start approaching him and asking for various things he does not understand. He is perplexed by their behavior and wonders how are they not afraid of dying. But despite their weird behavior, the alien goblins are efficient workers, and he rewards the goblins who complete their quests. Blue tells him that they needed to add more content to their dungeon for the entertainment of the goblins. It was a game to them, and the more content there was, the more motivated they would be to work. Sherlock worries that he doesn't have enough magic stones to provide them with entertainment, but Blue says that the goblins could fight monsters for that. They would be thrilled to do quests that involve killing monsters, and he should give them weapons and armor as a reward for that. Sherlock understands the gist of it and goes to check out the nest of spider monsters as the next addition to the dungeon game. There would be a large number of spider minions, and the Spider Queen would serve as the boss. He thinks that this challenge would be enough to satisfy his goblins, but Blue informs him that one goblin had died. Sherlock goes back and is concerned that the tasks he gave were too hard, but Blue tells him that the goblin died to test out the resurrection system of the game. His soul was trapped inside Blue, and he could return it after the body of the goblin was restored by the dungeon owner. Sherlock heals the body of the goblin, and Blue returns his soul. The goblin is revived, and now the other goblins also want to try it out. But Sherlock gets angry and scolds them and says that they should not die without the need for it. But once that has been done, Sherlock edits the official website and adds a new map and monsters to defeat. The Spider Queen is the main boss, and the site tells that the Demon Lord Sherlock will give his favor to anyone who brought her hair to him. He asks Blue why he had to give out such a reward, and Blue replies that the goblins liked it when their existence and efforts were acknowledged. Sherlock thinks that the goblins sounded like humans from the surface world, oblivious that they were humans from another world. But before that, he wants to see what the goblins said about him on the website, and is overjoyed on seeing that they liked his dungeon so much.